Jamie here with Country Diggers with another exciting adventure of Pirates of the Florida Coast, Truth, Legends, and Myths by Robert Jacob. And today we are on Chapter 11, Ranson's Miracle. So stay tuned. Chapter 11, Ranson's Miracle. One of the more interesting stories associated with the long and colorful history of St. Augustine is the story of the English pirate Andrew Ranson. He was captured in 1684, along with 10 others during one of the raids on a Spanish mission. Ranson was born in Newcastle, England around 1650 and came to the West Indies sometime in the 1670s. A professional sailor and possibly even a ship's pilot, he married and settled with his wife on New Providence, Bahamas, sometime prior to 1683. In reprisal to a 1664 Spanish attack, the governor of the Bahamas issued letters of marque to Captain Thomas Jingle to attack Spanish shipping and ports. Jingle had 5 vessels in his fleet, and Andrew Ranson signed aboard one of them. Just before sailing, they were joined by another English vessel from Charlestown that had participated in the failed attack of St. Augustine the previous year. Shortly after the 6 vessels left New Providence, they captured a Spanish frigate, the Planetarian, that was on its way from St. Augustine to Veracruz to collect the real Situado for the fort of San Marcos near Biscayne Bay, which is located near present-day Miami. They also captured a Spanish scout vessel that was gathering intelligence on English pirates for the governor of Cuba. The crew members of the scout vessel were mildly beaten to gather information about the nearby Spanish settlements. During their questioning, another vessel piloted by Ranson came alongside. Ranson boarded the main vessel and joined in the questioning by hitting one of the captured crewmen with a stick. The crewman was a Spanish sailor named Miguel Raymond. All the Spanish captives were eventually released. At a short time later, they were joined by 5 other privateer vessels. The captains met and decided they had a strong enough force to attack St. Augustine. But just as the privateer vessels approached the prize city, a severe storm scattered them in several directions. 5 of the vessels managed to regroup near the St. Johns River and decided to give up their plan to attack the city. However, they were in great need of food. 10 men under Ranson's command were sent ashore in a small pirogue to look for corn or anything else they could eat. Unfortunately for Ranson and some of his men, the Spanish were alerted and 50 soldiers were quickly dispatched from St. Augustine to intervene. Ranson and his men were easily captured and then taken to St. Johns River, where the Spanish soldiers forced them to signal to their vessels anchored ashore. The Spanish soldiers stayed hidden nearby and hoped to lure some of the Englishmen ashore so they could be captured too. The plan seemed to be working as a longboat filled with privateers soon approached the shore. But at the last minute, the privateers suspected an ambush and swiftly returned to their main vessel. Ranson and his men were taken back to St. Augustine to stand trial. At his trial, Ransom insisted that he was just one of the crew, but some of his men identified him as their leader in return for a lighter sentence. Then the Spanish prosecutor produced Miguel Raymond, the sailor whom Ransom had beaten earlier. He identified Ransom as the ship's pilot and one of the men who had beaten him. As a pilot, Ranson would most certainly be the leader of the group. Ranson's men were convicted and sentenced to hard labor for life, and Ranson, as their leader, was sentenced to death. Negotiations between England and Spain eventually led to the release of the others, but Ranson was still to die. While imprisoned in San Marcos awaiting execution, Ranson began speaking with the Franciscan priest named Perez de la Mota. Ranson and converted to Catholicism. Catholicism. Anyway, Catholic. He converted to the Catholic religion. Okay. The usual form of execution used by the 17th century Spanish was the garrote. In this method of execution, the prisoner stands with his back to an upright board, and a rope is placed around the prisoner's neck. The rope is tightened behind the board and strangles the prisoner to death. It normally takes about 6 twists to complete the process. In Ranson's case, as the rope was tightened and Ranson lost consciousness, the rope suddenly broke. Ranson quickly regained consciousness and the rope was examined. It was a new rope with no signs of wear. The only explanation for the rope breaking was offered by the priest, Perez de la Mota, who proclaimed it a divinely inspired miracle. Over the next 3 years, while Ranson sat in prison, the governor and the priest debated over the circumstances of the execution. Father Perez de la Mota insisted that it was a miracle and demanded Ranson's release, while the governor believed it was just unusual circumstances, and wanted him executed. This small affair quickly developed into a major rift between the church and the state that involved the bishop in Cuba and even the royal council back in Spain. In 1687, Quiroga y Lozada was appointed governor of Florida, and he wanted to end the difficulty between the church and his office. While the matter was being settled, he granted Ranson parole if he agreed to work as a carpenter on the construction of a new fort of San Marcos. By 1690, the case was finally brought to the authorities in Spain. On the king's orders, Ranson was released, and Father Perez de la Mota was summoned to Spain to give testimony. The case was finally heard in 1692 when La Mota produced the actual rope and argued the miracle defense on Ranson's behalf. But Spanish bureaucracy was exceptionally slow and inefficient. No decision was made, and eventually Ranson was returned to prison to await a verdict that never came. Ranson's luck finally changed in 1702. Spain and England were at war again, and the English from Charlestown laid siege to St. Augustine for 2 months. The new governor, Joseph de Zuniga Cerdada, offered Ranson his freedom if he acted as an interpreter. When the siege lifted, Ranson was released and finally left St. Augustine with the English attackers. In recent years, the fidelity of this story has come into question. Some pirate enthusiasts have even suggested that the entire story was invented in the late 20th century and that no historical documentation supporting this story exists. Those enthusiasts are incorrect. This story first appeared in 1960 as an article in the Florida Historical Quarterly titled Andrew Ranson, 17th Century Pirate. The article was written by Leitch J. Wright, Leitch, Leitch J. Wright, Wright, and was very well researched. Some of the original source documents from the 17th and 18th century that are cited in the article include correspondences from Friar Perez de la Mota, Governor Diego de Quiroga, Governor Diego de Quiroga y Lasada, and Governor Jose de Zuniga Cerda, Cerda. I believe this story to be completely true. All right. Hope y'all enjoyed, and the next time is Chapter 12, Did Captain Kidd Visit Florida? All right.